There is probably a good chance, as you have been on the internet in your daily lives, you have heard the phrase mobile first or responsive design. Now, as you become more familiar with software development, especially in the web development sphere of software development, you will begin to hear more and more the terms mobile first and responsive design. What this means is that there is a shift based on the fact that a huge amount of traffic on the internet nowadays originates from mobile devices such as tablets and cell phones, as well as other small screen devices. And with that change, where it used to be the majority desktop browsers that were hitting the internet, with that switch, a change in paradigm had to take place in how we design websites and web applications in the modern days. In other words, instead of developing all of our websites and web applications to work really well in just desktop browsers, with the thought of mobile devices just being the minority of devices hitting our websites, now we're approaching mobile devices being the majority of devices hitting our websites and web applications. So when we hear the term mobile first, what that is saying is that all web developers and web designers are supposed to be focusing on making sure their websites and web application user interfaces are designed for mobile devices first and then for desktop devices. In other words, make sure everything works really, really well on a mobile device, since the majority of devices are going to be some type of small screen mobile device. And then make sure, after you've done that, then make sure it works really well on a desktop system. With that comes mobile and responsive design. Responsive design was the first term used when we began to see more and more mobile devices taking over the internet. And we began to make our websites and our web applications responsive to the size of the screen that the user is using. And what's really cool is that in CSS, we are provided what are called media selectors or media queries that we can use to determine the size of the browser window. And based on that browser window, we can then modify the look and feel and the positioning or layout of the elements inside of our browser. So right here in this example, we have right here a navigation pane as well as some content, a paragraph and probably an H1. And with this, as we resize the window, using media queries, which is this right here, we've got at media, we're looking at the screen, and then we are checking for the min width of 480. When the screen itself reaches a minimum width of 480, then we get this style applied to it, and it begins to override the look and feel of the web page. So let's go ahead and try that. As we go bigger, we see it just does what a normal browser would do. But as we get smaller, as soon as we hit that minimum width of 480, we can see that shift that happens right there. The menu stays where it is, but we can see that the content moves from being to the right of the menu to being directly below the menu, and we have this shift in the viewport. Our layout and the look and feel of our web page changes in order to meet the requirements of this particular device's screen or the sizing of this window. And you can see right up here, when we hit that 180, or we go above 480, then it goes back to normal. As soon as we hit below 480, it shifts. So this is the responsive design that we're talking about, as well as mobile first. We are creating a user interface that works on a small screen device as well as on a desktop device. There are a lot of web developers and designers out there who actually create really cool templates for us that we can get for free, that are open source, or that we can purchase and buy for our websites or our applications. that use the mobile first and the responsive design paradigm in what they designed. Here I've got what's called Admin Lite or Admin LTE. It is a popular admin style or admin tool style user interface for an admin section of a website. Looks very similar to a WordPress blogs admin section on WordPress if you're used to that. But the reason why I have this one up here is that it does give us a really good idea of how media queries, so using these queries right here, can impact the overall design of an actual website or web application. And in this case, we've got a pretty complex user interface in that we have an entire navigation system over here, which has a ton of elements in it. And then in the main content, we also have a ton of different elements in here that are doing or responsible for all kinds of things, as well as another navigation bar up here that is specific to the user and user settings. And what I want to show you is that as we change the size of this viewport, what we're going to begin to see is the content in the viewport changing and modifying and scaling to fit the screen size that we are currently at. And there's our first biggest change right there. As soon as we got to what looks like a tablet size screen, we see that all of those items at the top, all of these blocks right here, suddenly shift and they become 2x2 grid. And then as we continue to shift down, we begin to see it modify. So now we're on a smaller tablet size or maybe a phone screen size as soon as we hit about here. We see that that left-hand menu suddenly becomes a hidden menu instead of it being fully disclosed. We also see the header. It moves up above that navigation. Before we had the Admin Lite header with title right here, and it was adjacent to that horizontal navigation with the vertical navigation being seen. And as we change the size of the browser viewport, the vertical menu now becomes a hidden menu in order to provide more screen real estate for the other more important controls. That header with the site name goes to the top above the horizontal navigation. And then instead of it being a 2x2 grid, now we are simply we're just rows, right? Instead of a 2x2 grid. Now each one takes up its own row in the screen. And as we begin to condense that, we end up with the minimum width right here. We can't go any smaller. That's as small as it allows us to go. And we can see just how everything has condensed and changed based on that viewport. And you can see we got some pretty dramatic ones down here in the bottom of the page with these other components that are in the page. We can see those changing as the viewport changes. Oh, now we can see that instead of them being on top of each other, we're back to them being more grid format in the page. And then we're back to regular web page size. So this is what mobile first means. This is what responsive web design is. And it all is accomplished using media queries. So go to the Mozilla Developer Network or go to the W3 Schools and read all about media queries and how you can use them to determine all the different media type queries. This one is specific for screen, but there are other types. And then the attributes that you can read from the HTML, from the browser, in order to determine what CSS effects or changes you want to take place based on whatever your media query finds out. Media queries, extremely powerful, extremely strong, and extremely important to the modern web with both desktop, tablet, and cell phones on the internet all the time.